The New York Giants thought they had a clear plan at pick number 5 until everything suddenly changed. One insider report just flipped the entire narrative, and now fans are split between 3 completely different futures. This isn't just a draft pick, it's a franchise-defining decision. But what's really happening behind the scenes might surprise you even more. Everyone thinks the New York Giants are just another team picking at number 5, but behind the scenes, something much bigger is happening. This isn't about grabbing the best player available or following the usual draft logic. This is about a complete identity shift, and it's being driven by one man, John Harbaugh. Because if you look closely at Harbaugh's history, a pattern starts to emerge. Everywhere he's been, one thing has always come first: stopping the run. Not improving it, not adjusting it, completely shutting it down. From inheriting legends like Ray Lewis to aggressively investing in players like C.J. Mosley, Patrick Queen, and Roquan Smith, Harbaugh has consistently built his defenses from the inside out. And now, that same philosophy is quietly taking over in New York. The numbers make it even more urgent. Since 2022, the Giants have been one of the worst run defenses in the entire league, giving up chunk plays, missing tackles, and getting pushed around at the line of scrimmage. For most teams, that's a weakness. For Harbaugh, that's unacceptable. Reports suggest he's made it clear internally: fixing the run defense isn't optional, it's the priority. And suddenly, everything about this draft starts to look different. Because while fans are debating flashy playmakers and offensive weapons, the front office might be locked in on something far less exciting but far more important: a physical, tone-setting defender who can completely change the way this team plays. Which raises the real question: are the Giants about to make a pick that shocks everyone, not because it's wrong, but because it reveals a plan nobody saw coming? And if that's true, one rising name suddenly makes a lot more sense. Everyone keeps talking about what the New York Giants should do at pick number 5. But what if the real answer has been quietly building behind the scenes this entire time? Because over the past few days, one name has started to gain serious momentum, and it's not the flashy one. It's not the viral highlight player fans can't stop debating. It's someone who fits a much deeper vision. And according to insider buzz from Ian O'Connor, that name is Sonny Styles. At first glance, it might not feel like the most exciting pick, but when you really break it down, it starts to make a lot of sense. Styles isn't just another linebacker. He's built differently: bigger, longer, more physical than most players at his position. The kind of presence that instantly changes how an offense approaches the game. Coaches love to talk about players who look the part, stepping off the bus. Styles defines that idea. And more importantly, he plays exactly how John Harbaugh wants his defense to play: aggressive, disciplined, and built to dominate the run. That's where things get interesting. Because while fans are debating versatility and offensive upside, the Giants might be zeroing in on something much simpler: control. Control the line, control the pace, control the game, and Styles fits that blueprint almost perfectly. He doesn't just fill a gap on the roster, he sets a tone. The kind of tone this team has been missing for years. And it's not just talk anymore. Betting odds are shifting. Analysts are starting to connect the dots. Reports are hinting that this isn't just a possibility, it's becoming the most likely outcome. The closer we get to draft night, the harder it is to ignore. But here where the tension builds. Because even with all that momentum, not everyone is convinced this is the right move. And that's where the real debate begins. The closer we get to draft night, the more this feels like a two-player battle, and it's starting to divide the entire New York Giants fan base. On one side, you have Sonny Styles, the physical enforcer, the tone setter, the guy who fits perfectly into John Harbaugh's vision of building a defense that can completely shut down the run. He's bigger, stronger, and built to dominate between the tackles. For some fans, it's simple: fix the biggest weakness first, no matter what. But then there's Caleb Downs, and this is where things get complicated. Because Downs isn't just a safety. He's the kind of player modern defenses are built around. You can line him up deep, bring him into the box, match him up in coverage, or use him as a hybrid weapon all over the field. He's unpredictable, explosive, the type of defender offenses struggle to identify before the snap. And in today's NFL, that kind of versatility can be just as valuable as raw physicality. Some analysts are even starting to question the obvious assumption. What if Downs actually impacts the run game just as much, or even more, than Styles? It sounds crazy at first, but when you look at how defenses operate today, it starts to make sense. Speed, instincts, and positioning can sometimes beat size alone. Downs doesn't just react, he anticipates. He closes space faster. He He creates chaos in ways that don't always show up on the stat sheet. So now the Giants are stuck in a fascinating dilemma. Do you go with the traditional, proven blueprint, a dominant linebacker who sets the foundation? Or do you lean into the future, a versatile playmaker who can change everything on any given snap? Two completely different philosophies, two potential cornerstones, and only one pick. But just when it feels like a clear two-man race, a third option is quietly entering the conversation. Just when it feels like this draft is turning into a clear two-player showdown, a third name is starting to creep into the conversation, and it might be the most dangerous option of all. Jeremiah Love. At first, it doesn't seem to fit. The New York Giants desperately need defensive help. Everyone knows that. The numbers back it up. The identity shift under John Harbaugh points heavily toward fixing the run defense, so why would they even consider going offense here? Because sometimes the biggest impact isn't about fixing your weakness, it's about creating something unstoppable. Jeremiah Love isn't just another running back prospect. He's explosive, dynamic, and capable of changing a game with a single touch, the kind of player who forces defenses to adjust instantly. If you pair him with a young quarterback and weapons already on the roster, you're suddenly looking at an offense that can put pressure on anyone in the league. And that's where the temptation comes in. Some fans believe the Giants are overthinking it. Instead of trying to patch every defensive hole, why not build an offense so dangerous it covers those flaws? Why not give your quarterback a weapon that can take over games, control tempo, and shift momentum in seconds? It's a completely different approach, but it's not crazy. In fact, in today's NFL, explosive offenses often dictate everything. They force opponents into uncomfortable situations. They make even elite defenses look average. And Jeremiah Love has the potential to be that kind of game breaker. But here's the risk. If the Giants go this route, they're essentially betting against their new identity. They're choosing flash over foundation, speed over physicality, and if it doesn't work, the same defensive problems could come back to haunt them all over again. Which is exactly why this decision isn't as simple as it seems. Because the most exciting option might also be the most controversial. And what happens next could completely flip this draft on its head. Just when it feels like the New York Giants are locked into one of those top names at pick number 5, there's another scenario quietly gaining traction, and it could change everything. The trade down. It's not the flashy move, it doesn't win headlines instantly, but behind the scenes it might be the strategy that makes the most sense for where this team is right now. Because while fans are focused on landing a star, the front office could be thinking much bigger than just one player. Reports and insider discussions suggest that John Harbaugh is open to moving back in the draft, and not because he's unsure, but because he might believe he can get more without sacrificing anything. Think about it. If the Giants move from 5 to somewhere like 8 or even 10, there's a very real chance they could still land one of their top targets. Whether it's Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs, both players could still be on the board. And if that happens, the Giants wouldn't just get their guy, they'd also pick up extra draft capital. That's where this becomes dangerous in a good way. An extra third-round pick, maybe even more, that's another starter, another contributor, another piece to fix multiple weaknesses instead of just one, and for a team that still has holes across the roster, especially in the trenches, that kind of flexibility is massive. Because this isn't just about one position. It's about building depth, it's about protecting against injuries, it's about creating competition across the roster, and most importantly, it's about accelerating a rebuild without cutting corners. But of course, it's not risk-free. Trading down means giving up control. It means trusting that your target won't get snatched by another team. It means sitting there, watching picks come off the board, hoping your plan doesn't fall apart in real time. And in a draft where multiple teams are desperate for defensive playmakers, that gamble could backfire fast. Still, there's a reason smart teams do it. Because when it works, it changes everything. Instead of walking away with just one big name, you walk away with multiple impact players. You turn one decision into 2 or 3, and suddenly your roster looks a lot more complete overnight. Which is why this scenario can't be ignored anymore. Because if the Giants pull it off, they might not just win the first round, they might quietly win the entire draft. But behind all these possibilities, one hidden strategy is starting to reveal what they truly want. While everyone is focused on the obvious names at pick number 5, there's something much quieter happening behind the scenes, and it might be the biggest clue yet about what the New York Giants are actually planning. Because if you look past the headlines and start paying attention to patterns, a different story starts to form. It begins with visits. Every year, teams bring in prospects for what are called top 30 visits. On the surface, it seems routine, just another part of the draft process. But for the Giants, it's been much more than that. Over the past few years, a significant portion of their draft picks have come directly from these visits. Not random, not coincidence, a pattern. And this year, that pattern is pointing somewhere interesting. Names like Spencer Fano are starting to show up on that list. Not the flashy skill position players grabbing headlines, but trench players, offensive linemen, physical, foundational pieces that don't always get the spotlight but often define how successful a team becomes. That's where the shift becomes clear. Because while fans are debating linebackers, safeties, and explosive playmakers, the front office might be thinking about something much more fundamental: control the line of scrimmage. It's something John Harbaugh has emphasized repeatedly. Build the offensive line, build the defensive line, win up front. Everything else comes after that. And when you connect that philosophy to the players they're spending time with, it starts to feel less like speculation and more like a blueprint. And here's the part that most people are missing. If the Giants truly prioritize the trenches, it changes how you view pick number 5 entirely. Maybe it's not about taking the most exciting player available. Maybe it's about setting up the next 3 years. Maybe it's about building a roster that doesn't just rely on star power, but dominates physically week after week. That could mean targeting linemen early. It could mean trading down to stack picks and address multiple positions. Or it could mean passing on a fan-favorite name in favor of someone who fits the long-term vision better. It's not the move that gets the loudest reaction, but it might be the smartest one. Because the teams that consistently win in this league don't just chase highlights, they build foundations. And right now, all signs are pointing to the Giants doing exactly that. Which raises one final question: do they stick to the plan or shock everyone when it matters most? At the end of all this, it becomes clear that this isn't just another draft pick for the New York Giants. This is a decision that could define the next decade of football in New York. Because no matter which direction they go, they're not just selecting a player, they're choosing an identity. If they take Sonny Styles, it sends a message loud and clear. This team is going back to its roots. Physical, aggressive, built to dominate the trenches and shut teams down. It's the kind of move that reflects everything John Harbaugh has believed in throughout his entire career: control the game by controlling the line of scrimmage. If they go with Caleb Downs, it signals something different: a shift toward versatility, speed, adaptability, a defense built for the modern NFL where unpredictability is just as valuable as power. It's not about brute force, it's about creating chaos and forcing mistakes. And if they shock everyone and take Jeremiah Love, that changes the conversation completely. Suddenly, it's about offense, explosion. Building a unit that can outscore anyone on any given Sunday. It's the boldest move of the three and easily the most controversial. But then, there's always the possibility that they don't choose any of them. A trade down, a curveball, a move that no one sees coming until it happens. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire situation. For the first time in years, there isn't a clear, predictable answer. There's no obvious pick that everyone agrees on, and strangely, that might be a good thing. Because it means the Giants finally have options. Real options. Different paths that could all lead to success or failure, depending on how they execute them. And that's what makes this moment so important. It's not just about getting the pick right, it's about committing to a vision and building around it without hesitation. Because in the NFL, hesitation is what keeps teams stuck in the middle. So now the pressure is on. Trust the system, trust the vision, trust the process. Or take a risk that could change everything. Because when the Giants are finally on the clock, They won't just be making a pick. They'll be revealing who they truly want to become. And once that choice is made, there's no going back.